To begin, I thought we would just have each panelist start off by introducing themselves, and we have a clip for each panelist as well that we'll play. So you can introduce yourself and introduce your clip as well to give us a little context.
Who do you want to start with?
Start with you.
Hi, my name's Amy Goldstein, and I have a film that showed last night called Kate Nash, Underestimate the Girl. And you want me to talk about the clip?
Sure, that'd be great.
The clip's kind of late in the film. It seemed like a really good example of building rapport, but you want me to talk about how we built rapport before they see the clip or after the clip?
Maybe we can talk about it after the clip.
It seems so. So it was kind of the crisis point in the film, and so it seemed like a real, and there's a lot of confusing, difficult things kind of going on that I thought would be interesting to talk about.
That sounds great. I think.
And I'm the director of the film, and I think it's very interesting that in documentaries, to build intimacy, you often need to shoot your own films, because you're in small spaces, the person is really used to you, you're pointing a camera at them. So I think that seemed to me one of the most important things of a way to build rapport is to have less people and people they're used to.
Yeah, that sounds excellent. I think, do we play the clip after after all the intros or after her intro? There we go.
Hello. Hello, my name is Meg Kettell. I'm a cinematographer based in Brooklyn, New York. And my clip is a family farm in Colorado. It's called Free Range, and we followed sort of the day or week in the life of this family where they're trying to go back to traditional farming. And this is sort of like a highlight clip, trailer, and then the documentary is being edited right now and will probably be out. Short-length documentary sort of next year.
Hello. My name is Katy Scoggin. The clip you're about to see is from a feature that I directed, as well as mostly shot along with some other DPs. This film was very much about building rapport with a real tough subject for me, my dad, and also myself. It's editing right now, and not a lot of folks have seen this footage, so it's still being worked on.
I'm Allison, and the clip I brought is from my new film, The Brink. I followed Steve Bannon for 13 months from when he left the White House through the 2018 midterms. And I decided to bring for you guys basically the beginning of the film. So then also it entices you. Then you're perfectly set up to go and watch the whole thing. So it's the opening kind of like 4 or 5 minutes. And just so you know what you're getting, but without giving it away, it's going to be through the like opening title and then one more scene. So it's kind of like the cold open and then the first scene of the film.
Thanks so much for those clips. I guess I'd love to start the conversation off just before even filming takes place and kind of walk through that process of how you build rapport with the subject before you even bring that camera out. And this is a question for all the panelists, but we can start with Amy. How did you approach Kate Nash and start that relationship that led to these more intimate moments later?
I think she was at a time in her life where she had been very famous and hated it, and kind of fought against it, and then was trying to figure out how to have a music career. So there was a part of her that wanted to document this process. I mean, she definitely didn't know that a lot of the things that happened along the way would happen, and I don't think you ever have an assurance you have a movie. We had a really compelling person who has done wonderful things for young women in music, and continues to recreate herself, and the things that she comes up against somehow bounces back, in a way that's kind of awesome, and she's fearless and funny. And we shared the same hair cutter, and Kate was getting her hair made pink to match the vaginas she was putting on the stage of Coachella. And playing in Coachella was huge for her. Since giving up fame, she had just been playing small clubs and really struggling. And so I don't think, we talked, I don't think we knew what we were gonna make. Early on, we thought we might do a series. So for me, I usually start shooting really early, but not with an insistence upon something. And I always give cameras to my subjects. And Kate really took to that. And so she filmed a lot of private moments, and she treated it like a job, and so then I knew she was serious about trying to figure out what we would make. But I find that if I don't film really early on, I miss the really good stuff, because they're really less thinking about it at that time. So, and I know lots of people don't, and hang out with people a lot, and I don't know if I'm right. But I end up using a lot of the stuff that I film really early on. But I think it was in the process. So, we met with companies. They told us what we'd have to do to make a series. I think we got close in opposition. Like, no, we're not going to film Kate dating. So then we were like, oh, we have a lot in common. There's like no money would, make us make that kind of film. And we went on tour with them right away, and we got close with the band, and so I think so you kind of become part of the tour. So I think it's by jumping in with people that it seems to work.
And Meg, in some cases, I know, as cinematographers, we end up going to a place, we meet strangers, and we have to build a rapport immediately. Like, that was an example you showed there, how do you go to a location you don't necessarily know the people, and you have to pull out a camera and start filming children and their day-to-day activities.
Yeah, for me, if there's any possibility to meet the subjects in advance and to scout in advance. And for this one, we had 3 scouting days, 2 weeks in advance of shooting. So we went to Colorado. We looked at the locations, at the light, the time of day we wanted to film, and then we had 4 kids who were just like normal kids living on a farm in Colorado who weren't used to cameras or lights or any of that stuff. And I just wanted to make sure we were getting that they weren't going to be intimidated by the sound and the cameras and all the equipment and stuff. So for the scouting days, we just sort of went with just a still camera and just tried to have dinner with the kids and talk to the kids and find out what they liked and didn't like and what they were into, so that we could just sort of have normal conversations with them before we started filming day one. And for me, that kind of scouting, sometimes it's a day in advance, sometimes it's weeks in advance, depends, just to sort of like show up and meet the person face to face without jumping in. That's sort of, you always want to avoid that if you can. So just so that you can have a rapport with the kids and they can understand who you are and what you're doing and why.
Moving on to talking about the flood with Katy, you're filming your father, you're filming yourself, but really filming your father has to be one of the hardest things in a sense, because it's someone you may already have some kind of rapport with, but then that could change. How did you start that process?
Well, the image of me climbing into the front seat of the car was our first film shoot, and that little moment of me loving him was kind of a landmark moment for me, because it was the first time that I put a mic on my dad. It was terrifying. Before that was a year of recorded phone conversations. It was too hard to talk about some of the stuff we needed to talk about in person, so we talked about it on the phone. And in a lot of personal docs, I think you kind of tiptoe into them, sometimes accidentally or backwards. Before the year of recorded phone calls, I asked advice of complete strangers who were somehow reminded me of my father, and asked them how I should reconnect to somebody whose beliefs were so different than my own. And it goes back beyond that as well, but I can just leave it there. But it took a lot of time. And for me, this being a personal film, a lot of it was just getting over my own personal hurdles. And once I crossed that threshold, things changed.
and of course, Steve Bannon, maybe the elephant in the room, Steve Bannon. A question for you, Allison. Yeah, I mean, you meet Steve Bannon, and how do you pull out a camera on him and get him comfortable filming, or was he already comfortable with the cameras?
It's like you see me stealing myself just to talk about it. So the reason I picked that clip, just one thing, I didn't want to say it before, but what's interesting is that cold open, that my shit in Auschwitz rocked story, that was filmed about 11 months in. And the green juice scene, as we call it, was filmed on day one. With him, you know, I would say day one of shooting was the third day that I interacted with him. I was brought to meet him, and the very briefest backstory is just in this case with, you know, there's always some interesting way that you get access to someone that seems crazy that you get access to, right? And in this case, the producer of the film, Marie-Therese Girgis, knew Bannon from the early 2000s when he was still a wannabe Hollywood mogul, and he had brought some investors together and bought an art house film distribution company where she worked, and he was her boss for 2 years. And that, the company closed, they fell out of touch. He's got the Tea Party and Breitbart and all these things that get him to the point where he is joining the Trump campaign. And that's when she reconnected with him, because she was like, I have his email, and just to send him really an aggressive, like, hate note to be like, please don't do this. You're going to hell. This is terrible. Like, you should quit. There's still time. I don't, you know, she's like, I don't know what I was thinking. But anyway, that was how, you know, he wins. He ends up in the White House. They like kind of stayed in touch for a correspondence in that vein, but he would always respond to her. And when she then asked him, she had the idea to do a verite doc, because she felt like the portrayal of him in the media was very one-dimensional, and it was also, even though it was negative, it was, she knew him and she knew he was loving it, he was milking it for power, you know, it was something that was actually a big asset to him. And even though she hadn't seen him in a really long time, she had a pretty good guess that the behind the scenes would kind of bring him, you know, down to life, both showing him as still a very dangerous figure, but also not quite the like master, you know, genius puppeteer that everyone was kind of giving him credit for. So he said no several times, then he said yes, and that's when she called me and said, you know, I think you're the filmmaker for the job. I had, you know, we'd worked together on other things. I did a film about Weiwei, which I also kind of approached in a similar way, where I shot myself and was very close to him. So when I met Bannon, that's all to say that, like, I was there to kind of cast him and decide if he was going to be good in a film, but then, you know, he wasn't, in terms of rapport, I just saw immediately he's one of those people, like, I didn't feel like I had to win him over. Like, he walked in, talking a mile a minute. Within 30 seconds, I was like, this guy's gonna say some shit. This is great. Like, he's gonna be a good, you know, he can hold the audience's attention for sure. And, you know, it was all about like actually getting physically around. And I just felt the name of the game was patience. Again, this is like a, maybe not typical for all documentary subjects, but, you know, with him, I was really there to try to expose. I really wanted him to reveal himself. I wasn't trying to like endear him to me per se, but I wanted him to have his guard down because he underestimated me, maybe. I didn't have a false persona, and I didn't pretend to agree with him or like him more than I did, really. I just kind of withheld my, you know, I kind of held myself. It was like giving less of myself was actually the name of the game. And yeah, day 2, I came with a camera, and I couldn't even get near him because his team like wouldn't let me. And I was like, called my producer, like, oh, you know, really upset that night, feeling like I had failed. Because everyone around him was way more suspicious of me than he was, which I thought was smart of them. And then the third day, I rolled for like 10 hours, and that green juice scene was one of them. And I just think like, I was just really skeptical or, suspicious of him and how he was gonna be manipulating the situation. So in the film too, you kind of don't hear me, like you start to hear me more and more as the filming goes on. And that's also very much how it was in real life, because I felt like I want to know a lot about him before I decide what kinds of questions I'm gonna ask. And then later in the film, you hear me intervene more and more. But yeah, that's just so.
That's fantastic. Yeah, the idea of giving less is an interesting approach. We can ask about in a second, but I guess I'm curious just about all of your filming strategies and what techniques you used with these projects and other projects. How did you decide to enter the room with the camera? Were you more of like a fly on the wall, kind of hiding in the background, giving less in a sense, or was it more like a collaboration? Maybe in the case of Kate Nash, possibly, where you're, perhaps moving around almost like a dance with the subject, and the subject is aware of the camera. So yeah.
I mean, it was a very verite film. And so, like, I guess one of the reasons also I don't have to get people used to lights and sound. My crew was me and my producer who did sound. On occasion, we had a second camera person or at concerts. But and we shoot with DSLRs. So we look like we're not doing anything. So we really play down our presence. And I really think it became as if we weren't there. And also they were just used to us. So I think because we're so low key. But I really feel like we crossed a lot of lines. Like someone came with us when we went to the desert, and another cinematographer, and he was like, so is this B-roll, is this interview, is this, and it's none of, it's everything. Like we didn't have, Kate is very fluid. Now she is someone who's used to being filmed. And so it's very different than going to a farm where people aren't used to cameras. And she's shooting herself for social media every she's shooting herself while we're shooting her, So, which is also why she took to the camera, but she did very different things. She's very scared about the film because it's very different than what you put on social media. I mean, she's very happy about it, but it's also frightening. But I think all the documentaries that I've done, we make it very casual, so it doesn't seem like a big deal. And obviously if we are ever with someone where they are uncomfortable, then we do it very differently. But I don't know, so far I think people are very used to being filmed, at least I think all the people that have been in my documentaries. So there doesn't seem to be a discomfort. I think we started making one thing and I think that helped. Like we were kind of doing a series and we were kind of goofy and we got used to each other. And then we realized we wanted to, we were going to make a documentary. So maybe that playfulness, was a way of, and I'm sure we used a little bit from the first kind of thing out. And I also, honestly, I never choose to use my budget to do anything but, be filming, because it's so tight that I just, that's why I'm also filming. But I have come to learn that by us all filming, it gives us a rapport, and people, they really get used to you, So yeah, no, they feel very free ultimately. And I'm sure over time we got more intimacy. But what I thought was really interesting, there's a lot of things that are odd about that scene. That, like, why are we in the middle of nowhere? Kate was in such a bad place. She wanted to go into the middle of nowhere, and so you do that. You're like, okay, because it took that to be able to let go, because she was holding on so hard to life. And she was going to be homeless, but she's wearing a shiny jacket, even though, it's not hers, but she has to wear that to feel the old self, to be able to let go. Now, it's a documentary, and you're like, really, you're going to wear that? But that you're not, that's none of your business, like it's what people need to do. And so it was always a really weird thing in the film, like she's wearing jewels, So it's just, that's why I thought it was such an interesting scene. Because if you build rapport, you have absolutely no right to tell someone what to wear. you know, and as she's putting that thing on, you know, like somebody gave her some stuff, and because she's also used to like photo shoots, and we're somewhere really beautiful, but that's who she is, you know. So like we just embraced, you know, who we're filming with and how we got. Somebody had followed her around for years who gave us footage, you know. So I just think that for me that's what being a documentary filmmaker is kind of going with, you know, what you got.
And Meg, what techniques do you prefer? Do you prefer to kind of take this like observational, hands-off approach, or do you sometimes have it be more of a collaboration with the subjects?
As a cinematographer and not a director, every project I have a different director, so I have to be sort of a chameleon, and sort of whatever the director needs and whatever the project needs is sort of what I do. So sometimes that's big, high-end sit-down interviews with lots of lights and lots of crew. A lot of times it's in the doc world, it's verite, where it's like me and a sound guy running around, very intimate with the subjects. And, you know, the Colorado shoot was a bigger crew, but I just got back from Buffalo, New York, doing a caregiver documentary, and that was just me and a sound guy. And, you know, the director looking over my shoulder. And so that was very verite. And I think that for me, I have to be able to sort of, I can do all the different things and all the different looks, and it's just about making sure that the director's getting what they want and that the subjects are as comfortable as possible. And I find that, like, just by listening and them seeing that you're listening and paying attention to them and what they're saying and what they're feeling, and I can read their faces and what they need if they're uncomfortable, that's the best way for them to trust me and to know that I'm looking out for them, you know, as a cinematographer.
Filming with your father, what techniques did you take in that project? And we could also talk about some of your other
Sure.
cinematography as well. But
Well, I would, with Dad, so I could give you the example of the difference between filming with my dad and filming with my mom. Dad actually loved the camera. He wanted to be listened to and observed. He was a bit of a ham in a funny way. And Mom hated it and was like, oh, that thing again. So the dance between me and both parents was quite different, as the dance with our parents probably is always different as, you know, their children. I think with any subject, when you're shooting verite, which is what I primarily do these days, the way you approach them as a DP is very dependent upon their personality as a human being. And I can give you the example of I have a family of subjects that I've been filming with on a longitudinal piece. They live in New York City. The issue that I deal with at this point is that we've become so close, and I often I shoot solo, that I have to create a boundary between, okay, when are we going to be friends, and when am I going to disappear again and get what the folks who have hired me need? That can become tricky when you build so much rapport with people over longitudinal projects. And with I would say I'd sort of split this type of stuff between subjects that you know and have grown close to as a filmmaker, and subjects that you don't know, that you kind of airdrop, whose lives you might airdrop into. That's where I notice a real difference. If I'm airdropping in and I just have to get the shot and leave, I at least try to make eye contact so that the person knows there's a human here. And I also want some kind of implicit okay from them, that they're okay that I'm filming. Whereas if it's someone I'm filming with on a longitudinal piece, it's more personality based, I guess, if that makes sense.
Going back to the Steve Bannon questions, I guess, were you sort of embedded while you made this film? Were you almost just in the background, part of the team, or did you have sort of these one-on-one moments as well?
Yeah, I mean, the film is entirely verite. There's no like formal sit-down interviews, but also, as you can see, like he talks to me a lot. I would say some of the hardest things are that I'm there and Bannon is like, you know, he's game for this, but everyone who walks in and out of his life every day didn't necessarily sign up for it. And I want a movie. My goal was to be riding shotgun along him and seeing him in action. So I needed other people to be in this movie. So there were a lot of times where once someone agrees to be filmed when they are taking a meeting with him, it's first time. So it was a real mix of like people who were very used to me and then people who I might, meet only once or I just met that day and I need to get them to not, besides agreeing, then it's also like to not be like, okay, can we stop? Can this like, can we, that's enough. Eric Prince had a real high camera awareness and would kick me out after a few minutes, despite my best efforts. But, really it was tricks as like, it wasn't about me talking. I would say I had a good, some of my tricks are once someone has agreed, in shooting verite, I like to start outside of the new person's eye line. Like I'll start behind their shoulder, or like even I also start far away. I shot on a zoom lens always, so I could be far away. Ideally, because I was there alone in the field, ideally Bannon would be wearing my wireless lav. Maybe I would have it on the table if he wasn't wearing it, or if there was like a lot of people and I was worried about capturing it. So I kind of like to be closer so that I also get the benefit of the shotgun mic, and then I have two sources of sound. But sometimes I feel like for people's comfort, it's not smart to start right up in their face. And so I usually would start, behind whoever isn't used to me. And then I like slowly kind of creep up, and I just kind of cover the scene until the point where I might be like really close and getting like a cross shot. But that's just kind of one of my, tricks, because I just know it's like a lot. Just because someone agreed doesn't mean that, they're comfortable. My goal is like, my ideal in the filmmaking that I do, I think I'm just so curious. These are also with people I would not choose to spend time with, but I'm there because I am so curious what happens in these rooms or what these people say to each other. And so my dream is that I'm seeing what would happen even if I wasn't there. So I would say in the field, I am really trying hard to like just to disappear as much as possible. And I do think being, just looking like who I am, and I'd wear like all black. I shot on a Sony, Sony cameras and on a monopod, and it's just me in a monopod, and like that's it, and there's no sound person, there's no so I feel like I'm just like that person in the corner, and maybe eventually I'm that person who's like kind of circling around the table and kind of right next to you. But I was always surprised when people were like, I keep forgetting you're there, which I still am like, really? Can you really forget that I'm there? But I think that it's possible if you do it. You just pick the order of how you get in people's faces, basically.
Yeah. That part of that leads into my next question for you all is how do you negotiate those kind of more intense moments that might come up where someone says like, okay, stop filming, or someone like Kate Nash is having like a breakdown on camera, lying on the floor. Or Bannon kind of losing his cool after the elections going poorly. You've built this rapport with your subjects. They might be comfortable now, but suddenly something happens. And how do you keep filming in those moments? We can start with the idea of Kate Nash, on the floor having a breakdown.
I mean, by the time that happened, we'd spent a lot of time together. And when we had left LA, she had started crying, and I hugged her for a while. And, so I feel like I built a relationship, a very caring one. And she wanted to go to the middle of nowhere. It was like the worst time in her life that I'd been with her. And we're in the middle of a salt marsh, like she was, usually I would feel bad pointing a camera at someone losing it like that, but she had made this choice. I mean, that was part of like wearing that crazy jacket. Like she needed to do this, So, I mean, when you use the word collaboration with your subject, and it was interesting, we had a Q&A last night, and she went like, I want you guys to know in a way, I did not make this movie, Amy made this movie. I love this movie, but it's not like a promo piece or something. But so it's her life, you know what I mean? So in a way we're collaborating because she's giving me access in an amazing way. But I feel like by the time we were doing that scene, and because of where we were, and it was okay, it really felt like her choice, that this is something she wanted to be doing there at this moment. So I don't know. I didn't feel like a war photographer, shooting us starving children. I felt like this person is. We've been doing this for a long time, and she knows what she's doing, and that somewhere she's strong, and this is what she wanted to do.
Yeah.
So in a way, it is a collaboration, I guess. Yeah.
Are there moments for the other panelists where things might have broken down in that relationship, or there's a moment where the person's like, we have to stop, or this is too intense? How do you negotiate those kind of intense moments with your subjects?
Just keep rolling audio.
I feel like it was, Bannon had absolutely no, creative control in the film. There'd be no way to do it if not for that. But that's what I would do with every film. But I had to be really, I was always like, if you or other people say they don't want to be filmed, that's your control. Your control is to say when you don't consent to be filmed. And everything else is kind of up to me. So similarly, if he is like, you should film this, it'll be great, and if I don't want to. Sometimes I film things that either he wanted me to film or I thought were total, performative for my camera. That's one of the tools I would say for building rapport. Also, as a director, if I'm in situations where I'm interviewing people, it's also a trick I do for interviews. I feel like if someone wants to talk, let the person talk about what they want to talk about first. Even if it's you're like, I am not interested. Definitely don't cut them off. Let people feel comfortable. You're interested in what they're interested in. But ultimately, and for Bannon too, I felt like it was very revealing. What is it that he wants to be filmed saying? That's, it's very revealing about him. But none of that, it doesn't need to, I don't need to put any of it in the film. So I also feel like a lot of the filming that you're pretty sure you can't use, within your budget, it's worth doing. That I count as building rapport. But ultimately, very much, it's my film. Every day on this one, I went in being like, how is this my film? What am I doing that what choices can I make, that make this my film? And one example, it wasn't really a dramatic thing, but he went around and met with a lot of world leaders, kind of despicable world leaders. And I wasn't allowed to film, him with Orban or him with, some of the people he met with, my goal every day was just to be as close as possible, to never be kicked out, to waiting in the lobby. If I was nearby, I thought maybe I'll have a chance to film something that he doesn't want me to film. It's kind of weird. My goal was to film stuff that he doesn't want me to film, but to have his consent to do it. And when he met with Matteo Salvini in Italy, I assumed it would be one of these, heads of state meetings that I'm not going to be able to film. But I was like, I'll just ride in the car. And then when we got to the Ministry of the Interior, it was pretty casual. Everyone just kind of walked in. I was like, I'm just going to come in with you guys too and bring the camera. And his team was like, okay, but you can't film this. I was like, totally. But I can't leave the camera in the car. So I have to, bring it in. And we're in the hallway. And I see, as we're all waiting for this meeting to happen, and he had an entourage that was going to sit in the meeting too, and he has bodyguards. So often I'd be alone with the bodyguards if I wasn't allowed to be in a meeting. But I see that the Ministry of the Interior has a photographer standing around. So I immediately clock, okay, there's going to be a photo op moment. That means it's something that's not completely off the record. Immediately I was and I didn't ask permission from his team, but I was just my goal is, if Italy's getting a photo, I can get that moment. It's and again, they can be mad afterwards, and if I can't use it, I can't use it, but you gotta try. And so then, I'm outside with the photographer, the bodyguards, Bannon's team is waiting to receive. Salvini walks in with his entourage to the room, and I'm really near the Italian photographer and, the woman who's holding the door open for everyone, and then the photographer, and she looks at me, she goes, prego, so I was just went in, and I stood behind their photographer, so my shot is more about this being a photo op moment. And, Bannon's team is looking, I'm trying not to totally make eye contact, but they're like, what do you do? Stop. And I was like, it's okay. They said I could. And so I just stayed behind the photographer. I filmed, as he got his shots, and when he left the room, so did I. I mean, there are limits. You can't just expect to like hang and it was gonna work out. But I feel like that was an example of where, you know, as much as everything has to be consenting, it was like, well, I don't work for his team, you know? So like if I'm here to get the shot and I can do it in like a proper way or an ethical way, like I'm gonna do it even if they said please don't, and like wait to be told, you know, if you can't. So yeah, I think sometimes it was a lot of maneuvering, less to like how to shoot or not stop, it's like how to just get in the room was always the trick.
I think we're going to actually open it up to any questions from the audience on the subject of building rapport. Does anyone have any sort of follow-up questions about some of the ideas that we've been discussing on stage? If not, I can ask one. Yes.
I started with an FS700, a Sony FS700. It's like, it's big, I don't know. And moved up to FS7, basically the same size. And I like don't love the shoulder mounted feel, so I had it on a monopod and kind of use it like it's handheld, but the monopod helps me. I mean, occasionally if I want it to be more stable, you can kind of fake it. I mean, I never had a tripod because I just like didn't have a way to carry that around with me. But I kind of like the feeling of like, you know, it's on, and maybe I would shake it a little just to feel like it's handheld, but it would be, you know, it just helped. I also sometimes lifted the monopod and kind of would like follow, like it was a really crappy, you know, kind of a steady cam. But also then I could like lift it up much higher if I needed. Sometimes in like scrum kind of situations where he was, you know, walking and there was like a ton of press around him, which happened a few times like in Europe, like I could kind of follow. I mean, I was like praying that it was, you know, it was exposed right in focus, but that was kind of all I could do, because if I had it at my level, it would just be like a sea of heads, you know? So I love having the monopod. Probably the weight of my camera, it exceeds like what that monopod should hold just a little bit, but I think, you know, I just would be constantly like, tightening the bolts every like couple of days and just hoping that it worked. It just kind of becomes like an extension of me, and it made it so that I could move around again, because I didn't have anyone to help move gear, and he's on the move a lot. You see in the film is a lot of private planes, a lot of you know, private SUV cars, and you know, I felt like I needed to be self-sufficient so that I could, to keep that access, like I needed to be able to be like, sure, I can like go here, I can go there, I don't need anyone's help, you know, and just kind of be this like, I mean, I'm sure I probably looked like sweaty and gross all the time, but you know, one time I sent someone else to cover an event that I didn't use, and it was a cinematographer who operated by himself somewhere in Florida. Just I got a name from someone. I didn't know anyone in that area, and Bannon went for a campaign event. And I think that guy brought an easy rig, and he covered it that way. And you know, it was towards the end of this project, and Bannon's team, when I came back, they're like, "Oh man, he had so much, like he had real gear, you know, like he had real professional stuff." I was like, okay, you know. I mean, the point is not to, you know, like I was like, yeah, I'm sure that like really blended in with you guys, you know. I think trying to be like low profile. So I like my setup, and I try to make it as light as possible so I can go for a long time.
I like shooting on small cameras. We shot CITIZENFOUR and Risk on the FS100, which is a 1080p camera that you should not buy because it's 1080p. But I now shoot on a camera that's about the same size, the Sony FS5. I find it really ergonomic. I can build it out the way that I like to use it. I do not use a lot of fancy professional looking equipment because it actually looks ridiculous to me. I like to use my body as a stabilizing mechanism, and also, I mean, most cameras have really great image stabilization now as well that you can rely on if you need to. You can always shoot on sticks, of course, too. If you're looking at tripods, Gitzo has really awesome carbon fiber, very lightweight legs that I think is great for documentary shooting. And you can buy a nice fluid head to put on that. But I mean, the Sony A7S II is a fantastic camera. That's even tinier. I mean, and if you need to get into like covert situations, but you also don't want to have a fixed lens camera, you want to be able to interchange your lenses, you can sneak that in all over the place.
With the Colorado shoot for Free Range, we shot on the Sony FX9. We were actually one of the first brand new Sony camera that came out in September, and we were one of the first DPs in the United States to shoot on it. So that was really fun for me because it's basically like an FS7 but much improved. It's very light, very easy to handheld. We had sticks available and an easy rig for some of the running around in the field with the kids. Also goes really nice on your shoulder. I like to do like an onboard monitor on top of that. It's great.
So I shoot with the smallest cameras here. So the A7 series they're talking about. So there's an A7R and A7S series. And I think we're all shooting with Sony because they let you shoot in the lowest light, and they're the most responsive. I like to shoot with multiple cameras, and I can have a couple of them in my backpack and a couple lenses. I do the monopod trick. So I'll stick cameras places or on sticks somewhere and try to run around and sometimes be on that camera, but I'm mainly on the camera on the monopod. And exactly what you're describing. You know, so Kate would stage dive. I'd have the monopod. I'd put it up in the air, and you hope for the best. And you tend to get it. You know, I mean, you've already fixed it for the correct, exposure. And but I don't think I'm as strong as the rest of them. And the Sony's really light. And, I think my film looks really good. And it's kind of an amazing, awesome camera. And I always just, upgrade, when newer, better ones come out. But it's very funny that I think we're all shooting on Sony. But I mean, it's just super responsive.
A last question from the audience. We might be down to our last question. Is there any final follow-up questions from the audience? What's that? No. Yeah. Oh, all the way in the back. Yeah.
My question was, I was curious about the prep that's involved for you guys when you pick a subject, that you're going to be filming. Do you guys spend a lot of time researching what you're doing and how that works out? And then, that's pretty much it.
Prep. Anyone have any thoughts on prep?
I mean, yeah, I learned everything I could about Kate Nash. I listened to all their songs. We interviewed a lot of people that aren't in our movie, but I always do it with a camera because you never know. But I think that was part of prep. We went to England, and I learned a lot of stuff from them that she doesn't remember, and then I knew what to ask her. So, but yeah, I think anybody who makes a documentary immerses themselves in the world of that. Whether it's that person, or I'm doing a film on a college right now, whatever the world is, you absolutely, I don't think anybody would not immerse themselves in that world.
Prep for me, because as a cinematographer, is more of working with my director in advance, getting on the same page, knowing we have the same references, what we want to achieve, how we want to achieve it, how big do we want to be, how small do we want to be, how many cards and batteries I'm going to need for getting through the day or through the week, or asking lots and lots of questions. For me, I want to be on the same page with my director before we roll the first frame so that I can, on dock, run off and go follow the subjects and not have to even confer because I know what we want and I know how to get it. And so for me, that's my prep is a little different than the director's prep, which is a little more immersive in the subject. Mine's more sort of immersive in the camera language with the director.
Yeah, I think it depends on whether you're directing and shooting or just shooting. Totally. If you're directing, you might spend years researching a subject. I feel like I could write a dissertation on evolution and creationism at this point. I know how to fossil hunt, and I know that the Earth is 6,000 years old, and I can tell you why. I mean, it's so prep, but in terms of rapport, yeah, that's character work. I think it's, but the more you know about your subjects and what they're interested in, the more you can connect to them as well. So, but I guess that's directing stuff. Yeah.
And I agree with all of that. And I would just add, one of the other ways you kind of need to immerse yourself when you're doing a verite or like a follow doc is like you basically have to stalk the person. I mean, I feel like as much as my subjects, let's say two very different people, Weiwei or Steve Bannon, like were agreed to be in a film and let me be around for a long time. Like I am not the first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth most important thing in these people's lives. And so it's really up to me to know what they're doing as much as I can to like either force them to disclose or find some other way, and then to, you know, try to ask if I can go along. And I just feel like it's not like we have like a production meeting and it's like, well, maybe we'll film this, and like the amount of kind of building rapport I had to do with like Bannon's team, who would know where he was going, and they made plans on a very last minute basis. I mean, I had days where I was like, I'm either flying to Italy or maybe Brazil, or maybe I'm gonna go to DC, or maybe none of the above. Like I have no idea. And I thought they were keeping me out of the loop, and I realized they also just like didn't know things till the last minute because he has a very disorganized, you know, not very professional kind of team and way he operates. So I think that's just really important as much as it's like knowing about the person. And I would confess, I do the same kind of immersion, but also it happens alongside my filming too. Things I've done, I don't necessarily know everything before I shoot a frame. I like want it to be a process of discovery. So, you know, I'm finding out what I need to know more of. But I completely agree. If you know more than they think you do, that's going to really help you so that you can anticipate and whether it's ask better questions or know where they're going to be, and that, you know, you're kind of always tracking storylines too, you know, in your head. And it's really like you don't know what's going to happen if you're making a certain kind of film, right? And so you need to, I think, just know as much as you can and really, you know, figure out how you're going to know what they're planning to do in their life. You know, you might not know what's happening in 6 months. It's literally like, where are you going in the next few weeks? And like, is it relevant for me to film?
Excellent. I think we will be wrapping up the panel actually at this point, but thank you all so much for being here today and having this conversation. And thank you to the audience as well.
Thank you.
If people have follow-up questions for the filmmakers, I think they'll be around, probably in the lounge. But certainly, let's continue the conversation, and we'll start the next panel shortly with a whole other set of cinematographers.